5 Children and It. Part 2. The morning after the children had been the possessors of boundless wealth and had been unable to buy anything really useful or enjoyable with it, except 2 pairs of cotton gloves, 12 penny buns, an imitation crocodile skin purse, and a ride in a pony cart. They awoke without any of the enthusiastic happiness which they had felt on the previous day when they remembered how they had had the luck to find a Sammead, or sand fairy, and to receive its promise to grant them a new wish every day. For now they had had 2 wishes, beauty and wealth, and neither had exactly made them happy. But the happening of strange things, even if they are not completely pleasant things, is more amusing than those times when nothing happens but meals. And they are not always completely pleasant, especially on the days when it is cold mutton or hash. There was no chance of talking things over before breakfast, because everyone overslept itself, as it happened, and it needed a vigorous and determined struggle to get dressed so as to be only 10 minutes late for breakfast. During this meal, some efforts were made to deal with the question of the Sammead in an impartial spirit, but it is very difficult to discuss anything thoroughly and at the same time to attend faithfully to your baby brother's breakfast needs. The baby was particularly lively that morning. He not only wriggled his body through the bar of his high chair and hung by his head, choking and purple, but he collared a tablespoon with desperate suddenness, hit Cyril heavily on the head with it, and then cried because it was taken away from him. He put his fat fist in his bread and milk and demanded nom, which was only allowed for tea. He sang, he put his feet on the table, he clamored to go walking. The conversation was something like this. Look here, about that sand fairy, look out. He'll have the milk over. Milk removed to a safe distance. Yes, about that fairy, no, lamb dear, give panther the narky-poon. Then Cyril tried. Nothing we've had yet has turned out. He nearly had the mustard that time. I wonder whether we'd better wish hullo. You've done it now, my boy. And in a flash of glass and pink baby paws, the bowl of golden carp in the middle of the table rolled on its side and poured a flood of mixed water and goldfish into the baby's lap and into the laps of the others. Everyone was almost as much upset as the goldfish, the lamb only remaining calm when the pool on the floor had been mopped up and the leaping, gasping goldfish had been collected and put back in the water. The baby was taken away to be entirely redressed by Martha, and most of the others had to change completely. The pinafores and jackets that had been bathed in goldfish and water were hung out to dry. And then it turned out that Jane must either mend the dress she had torn the day before or appear all day in her best petticoat. It was white and soft and frilly and trimmed with lace and very, very pretty, quite as pretty as a frock, if not more so. Only it was not a frock, and Martha's word was law. She wouldn't let Jane wear her best frock, and she refused to listen for a moment to Robert's suggestion that Jane should wear her best petticoat and call it a dress. It's not respectable, she said. And when people say that, it's no use anyone saying anything. You will find this out for yourself someday, so there was nothing for it but for Jane to mend her frock. The hole had been torn the day before when she happened to tumble down in the high street of Rochester, just where a water cart had passed on its silvery way. She had grazed her knee, and her stocking was much more than grazed, and her dress was cut by the same stone which had attended to the knee and the stocking. Of course, the others were not such sneaks as to abandon a comrade in misfortune, so they all sat on the grass plot round the sundial, and Jane darned away for dear life. The lamb was still in the hands of Martha, having its clothes changed, so conversation was possible. Anthea and Robert timidly tried to conceal their inmost thought, which was that the Samide was not to be trusted. But Cyril said, "Speak out, say what you've got to say. I hate hinting, and don't know, and sneakish ways like that." So then Robert said, as in honor bound, "Sneak yourself. Anthea and me weren't so goldfishy as you two were, so we got changed quicker, and we've had time to think it over. And if you ask me, I didn't ask you," said Jane, biting off a needleful of thread, as she had always been strictly forbidden to do. "I don't care who asks or who doesn't," said Robert, "but Anthea, and I think the Samiad, is a spiteful brute. If it can give us our wishes, I suppose, it can give itself its own, and I feel almost sure it wishes, every time, that our wishes shan't do us any good. Let's let the tiresome beast alone, and just go and have a jolly good game of forts, on our own, in the chalk pit. You will remember that the happily situated house, where these children were spending their holidays, lay between a chalk quarry and a gravel pit." Cyril and Jane were more hopeful. They generally were. "I don't think the Samiad does it on purpose," Cyril said. "And after all, it was silly to wish for boundless wealth. £50 in 2-shilling pieces would have been much more sensible, and wishing to be beautiful as the day was simply donkish. I don't want to be disagreeable, but it was. We must try to find a really useful wish and wish it." Jane dropped her work and said, "I think so too. It's too silly to have a chance like this and not use it. I never heard of anyone else outside a book who had such a chance. There must be simply heaps of things we could wish for that wouldn't turn out dead sea fish, like these two things have. Do let's think hard and wish something nice, so that we can have a real jolly day, what there is left of it." Jane darned away again like mad, for time was indeed getting on, and everyone began to talk at once. If you had been there, you could not possibly have made head or tail of the talk. But these children were used to talking, by fours, as soldiers march, and each of them could say what it had to say quite comfortably, and listen to the agreeable sound of its own voice, and at the same time have 3/4 of 2 sharp ears to spare for listening to what the other said. That is an easy example in multiplication of vulgar fractions. But, as I dare say, you can't do even that, I won't ask you to tell me whether 3/4x2 equals 112. But I will ask you to believe me that this was the amount of ear each child was able to lend to the others. Lending ears was common in Roman times, as we learn from Shakespeare, but I fear I am getting too instructive. When the frock was darned, the start for the gravel pit was delayed by Martha's, insisting on everybody's washing its hands, which was nonsense, because nobody had been doing anything at all except Jane. And how can you get dirty doing nothing? That is a difficult question, and I cannot answer it on paper. In real life, I could very soon show you, or you me, which is much more likely. During the conversation in which the 6 ears were lent, there were 4 children, so that sum comes right. It had been decided that 50 pounds in 2-shilling pieces was the right wish to have, and the lucky children, who could have anything in the wide world by just wishing for it, hurriedly started for the gravel pit to express their wishes to the Samide. Martha caught them at the gate and insisted on their taking the baby with them. Not want him indeed. Why, everybody 'ud want him, a duck. With all their hearts they would. And you know you promised your ma to take him out every blessed day, said Martha. I know we did, said Robert in gloom. But I wish the lamb wasn't quite so young and small. It would be much better fun taking him out. He'll mend of his youngness with time, said Martha. And as for his smallness, I don't think you'd fancy carrying of him any more, however big he was. Besides, he can walk a bit. Bless his precious fat legs, a ducky. He feels the benefit of the new-laid air, so he does, a pet. With this and a kiss, she plumped the lamb into Anthea's arms and went back to make new pinafores on the sewing machine. She was a rapid performer on this instrument. The lamb laughed with pleasure and said, "Walkie with Panty," and rode on Robert's back with yells of joy, and tried to feed Jane with stones, and altogether made himself so agreeable that nobody could long be sorry that he was of the party. The enthusiastic Jane even suggested that they should devote a week's wishes to assuring the baby's future, by asking such gifts for him as the good fairies give to infant princes in proper fairy tales. But Anthea soberly reminded her that, as the sand fairies' wishes only lasted till sunset, they could not ensure any benefit to the baby's later years, and Jane owned that it would be better to wish for 50 pounds in 2-shilling pieces, and buy the lamb a 3-pound-15 rocking horse, like those in the Army and Navy stores list, with part of the money. It was settled that, as soon as they had wished for the money and got it, they would get Mr. Crispin to drive them into Rochester again, taking Martha with them if they could not get out of taking her. And they would make a list of the things they really wanted before they started, full of high hopes and excellent resolutions. They went round the safe, slow cart road to the gravel pits, and as they went in between the mounds of gravel, a sudden thought came to them, and would have turned their ruddy cheeks pale if they had been children in a book. Being real live children, it only made them stop and look at each other with rather blank and silly expressions. For now they remembered that yesterday, when they had asked the Samide for boundless wealth, and it was getting ready to fill the quarry with the minted gold of Bright Guinea's millions of them. It had told the children to run along outside the quarry for fear they should be buried alive in the heavy, splendid treasure. And they had run, and so it happened that they had not had time to mark the spot where the Samide was, with a ring of stones, as before. And it was this thought that put such silly expressions on their faces. "Never mind," said the hopeful Jane. "We'll soon find him." But this, though easily said, was hard in the doing. They looked and they looked, and though they found their seaside spades, nowhere could they find the sand fairy. At last, they had to sit down and rest, not at all because they were weary or disheartened, of course, but because the lamb insisted on being put down, and you cannot look very carefully after anything you may have happened to lose in the sand if you have an active baby to look after at the same time. Get someone to drop your best knife in the sand next time you go to the seaside, and then take your baby brother with you when you go to look for it, and you will see that I am right. The lamb, as Martha had said, was feeling the benefit of the country air, and he was as frisky as a sandhopper. The elder ones longed to go on talking about the new wishes they would have when, or if, they found the Sammead again. But the lamb wished to enjoy himself. He watched his opportunity and threw a handful of sand into Anthea's face, and then suddenly burrowed his own head in the sand and waved his fat legs in the air. Then, of course, the sand got into his eyes, as it had into Anthea's, and he howled. The thoughtful Robert had brought one solid brown bottle of ginger beer with him, relying on a thirst that had never yet failed him. This had to be uncorked hurriedly. It was the only wet thing within reach, and it was necessary to wash the sand out of the lamb's eyes somehow. Of course, the ginger hurt horribly, and he howled more than ever, and amid his anguish of kicking, the bottle was upset, and the beautiful ginger beer frothed out into the sand, and was lost forever. It was then that Robert, usually a very patient brother, so far forgot himself as to say, anybody would want him indeed. Only they don't. Martha doesn't, not really, or she'd jolly well keep him with her. He's a little nuisance. That's what he is. It's too bad. I only wish everybody did want him with all their hearts. We might get some peace in our lives. The lamb stopped howling now, because Jane had suddenly remembered that there is only one safe way of taking things out of little children's eyes, and that is with your own soft, wet tongue. It is quite easy if you love the baby as much as you ought to. Then there was a little silence. Robert was not proud of himself for having been so cross, and the others were not proud of him either. You often notice that sort of silence when someone has said something it ought not to, and everyone else holds its tongue and waits, for the one who oughtn't to have said it is sorry. The silence was broken by a sigh, a breath suddenly let out. The children's heads turned as if there had been a string tied to each nose, and someone had pulled all the strings at once, and everyone saw the sand fairy sitting quite close to them, with the expression which it used as a smile on its hairy face. "Good morning," it said. "I did that quite easily. Everyone wants him now." "It doesn't matter," said Robert sulkily, because he knew he had been behaving rather like a pig. "No matter who wants him, there's no one here to anyhow. Ingratitude," said the Sammead, "is a dreadful vice. We're not ungrateful," Jane made haste to say, "but we didn't really want that wish. Robert only just said it. Can't you take it back and give us a new one?" "No, I can't," the sand fairy said shortly. chopping and changing. It's not business. You ought to be careful what you do wish. There was a little boy once. He'd wished for a plesiosaurus instead of an ichthyosaurus because he was too lazy to remember the easy names of everyday things, and his father had been very vexed with him and had made him go to bed before tea time and wouldn't let him go out in the nice flint boat along with the other children. It was the annual school treat next day, and he came and flung himself down near me on the morning of the treat, and he kicked his little prehistoric legs about and said he wished he was dead. And of course then he was. How awful, said the children all together. Only till sunset, of course, the Samite said. Still, it was quite enough for his father and mother. And he caught it when he woke up, I can tell you. He didn't turn to stone, I forget why. But there must have been some reason. They didn't know being dead is only being asleep, and you're bound to wake up somewhere or other, either where you go to sleep or in some better place. You may be sure he caught it, giving them such a turn. Why, he wasn't allowed to taste megatherium for a month after that. Nothing but oysters and periwinkles and common things like that. All the children were quite crushed by this terrible tale. They looked at the Samite in horror. Suddenly, the lamb perceived that something brown and furry was near him. Poof, poof, poofy, he said, and made a grab. It's not a pussy, Anthea was beginning, when the sand fairy leaped back. Oh, my left whisker, it said, don't let him touch me. He's wet. Its fur stood on end with horror, and indeed a good deal of the ginger beer had been spilt on the blue smock of the lamb. The Samite dug with its hands and feet, and vanished in an instant and a whirl of sand. The children marked the spot with a ring of stones. We may as well get along home, said Robert. I'll say I'm sorry, but anyway, if it's no good, it's no harm, and we know where the sandy thing is for tomorrow. The others were noble. No one reproached Robert at all. Cyril picked up the lamb, who was now quite himself again, and off they went by the safe cart road. The cart road from the gravel pits joins the road almost directly. At the gate into the road, the party stopped to shift the lamb from Cyril's back to Robert's. And as they paused, a very smart open carriage came in sight, with a coachman and a groom on the box. And inside the carriage, a lady, very grand indeed, with a dress all white lace and red ribbons, and a parasol all red and white, and a white fluffy dog on her lap with a red ribbon round its neck. She looked at the children, and particularly at the baby, and she smiled at him. The children were used to this, for the lamb was, as all the servants said, a very taking child. So they waved their hands politely to the lady and expected her to drive on. But she did not. Instead, she made the coachman stop, and she beckoned to Cyril, and when he went up to the carriage, she said, "What a dear, darling duck of a baby. Oh, I should so like to adopt it. Do you think its mother would mind?" "She'd mind very much indeed," said Anthea shortly. "Oh, but I should bring it up in luxury, you know. I am Lady Chittenden. You must have seen my photograph in the illustrated papers. They call me a beauty, you know, but of course that's all nonsense. Anyway, she opened the carriage door and jumped out. She had the wonderfulest red high-heeled shoes with silver buckles, "Let me hold him a minute," she said. And she took the lamb and held him very awkwardly, as if she was not used to babies. Then suddenly she jumped into the carriage with the lamb in her arms and slammed the door and said, "Drive on." The lamb roared, the little white dog barked, and the coachman hesitated. "Drive on, I tell you," cried the lady, and the coachman did, for, as he said afterwards, it was as much as his place was worth not to. The 4 children looked at each other, and then, with one accord, they rushed after the carriage and held on behind. Down the dusty road went the smart carriage, and after it, at double quick time, ran the twinkling legs of the lamb's brothers and sisters. The lamb howled louder and louder, but presently his howls changed by slow degree to hiccupy gurgles, and then all was still, and they knew he had gone to sleep. The carriage went on, and the 8 feet that twinkled through the dust were growing quite stiff, and tired before the carriage stopped at the lodge of a grand park. The children crouched down behind the carriage, and the lady got out. She looked at the baby as it lay on the carriage seat and hesitated. "Darling, I won't disturb it," she said, and went into the lodge to talk to the woman there about a setting of buff Orpington eggs that had not turned out well. The coachman and footman sprang from the box and bent over the sleeping lamb. "Fine boy, wish he was mine," said the coachman. "He wouldn't favor you much," said the groom sourly, "too handsome." The coachman pretended not to hear. He said, "Wonder at her now, I do really. Hates kids, got none of her own, and can't abide other folkses." The children, crouching in the white dust under the carriage, exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Tell you what," the coachman went on firmly, "blowed if I don't hide the little nipper in the hedge and tell her his brothers took. I am then, I'll come back for him afterwards." "No, you don't," said the footman. "I've took to that kid so as never was. If anyone's to have him, it's me, so there." "Stow your gab," the coachman rejoined. "You don't want no kids, and if you did, one kid's the same as another to you. But I'm a married man and a judge of breed. I knows a first-rate yearling when I sees him. I'm a-goin' to ave him, and least said soonest mended." "I should ha' thought," said the footman sneeringly, "you'd a-most enough. What with Alfred and Albert and Louise and Victor Stanley and Helena Beatrice and another," the coachman hit the footman in the chin. The footman hit the coachman in the waistcoat. The next minute the two were fighting here and there, in and out, up and down, and all over everywhere, and the little dog jumped on the box of the carriage and began barking like mad. Cyril, still crouching in the dust, waddled on bent legs to the side of the carriage farthest from the battlefield. He unfastened the door of the carriage. The 2 men were far too much occupied with their quarrel to notice anything took the lamb in his arms, and still stooping, carried the sleeping baby a dozen yards along the road to where a stile led into a wood. The others followed, and there among the hazels and young oaks and sweet chestnuts, covered by high, strong-scented bracken, they all lay hidden till the angry voices of the men were hushed at the angry voice of the red and white lady. And after a long and anxious search, the carriage at last drove away. "My only hat," said Cyril, drawing a deep breath as the sound of wheels at last died away. Everyone does want him now, and no mistake. That Samyad has done us again. Tricky brute. For any sake, let's get the kid safe home. So they peeped out, and finding on the right hand only lonely white road, and nothing but lonely white road on the left, they took courage, and the road, Anthea carrying the sleeping lamb. Adventures dogged their footsteps. A boy with a bundle of faggots on his back dropped his bundle by the roadside and asked to look at the baby, and then offered to carry him. But Anthea was not to be caught that way twice. All walked on, but the boy followed, and Cyril and Robert couldn't make him go away till they had more than once invited him to smell their fists. Afterwards, a little girl in a blue and white checked pinafore actually followed them for a quarter of a mile, crying for the precious baby. And then she was only got rid of by threats of tying her to a tree in the wood with all their pocket handkerchiefs, so that the bears can come and eat you as soon as it gets dark, said Cyril severely. Then she went off crying. It presently seemed wise to the brothers and sisters of the baby, who was wanted by everyone, to hide in the hedge whenever they saw anyone coming, and thus they managed to prevent the lamb from arousing the inconvenient affection of a milkman, a stone breaker, and a man who drove a cart with a paraffin barrel at the back of it. They were nearly home when the worst thing of all happened. Turning a corner suddenly, they came upon 2 vans, a tent, and a company of gypsies encamped by the side of the road. The vans were hung all round with wicker chairs and cradles, and flower stands and feather brushes. A lot of ragged children were industriously making dust pies in the road. 2 men lay on the grass smoking, and 3 women were doing the family washing in an old red watering can with the top broken off. In a moment, all the gypsies, men, women, and children, surrounded Anthea and the baby. "Let me hold him, little lady," said one of the gypsy women, who had a mahogany-colored face and dust-colored hair. "I won't hurt a hair of his head, the little picture." "I'd rather not," said Anthea. "Let me have him," said the other woman, whose face was also of the hue of mahogany, and her hair jet black, in greasy curls. "I've 19 of my own, so I have." "No," said Anthea bravely, but her heart beat so that it nearly choked her. Then one of the men pushed forward. "Swelp me if it ain't," he cried, "my own long-lost child. Have you a strawberry mark on his left ear? No. Then he's my own babby, stolen from me in innocent infancy. And I am over, and will not ave the law on you this time." He snatched the baby from Anthea, who turned scarlet and burst into tears of pure rage. The others were standing quite still. This was much the most terrible thing that had ever happened to them. Even being taken up by the police in Rochester was nothing to this. Cyril was quite white, and his hands trembled a little, but he made a sign to the others to shut up. He was silent a minute, thinking hard. Then he said, "We don't want to keep him if he's yours, but you see he's used to us. You shall have him if you want him." "No, no," cried Anthea, and Cyril glared at her. "Of course we want him," said the women, trying to get the baby out of the man's arms. The lamb howled loudly. "Oh, he's hurt," shrieked Anthea, and Cyril, in a savage undertone, bade her stow it. "You trust to me," he whispered. "Look here," he went on. "He's awfully tiresome with people he doesn't know very well. Suppose we stay here a bit till he gets used to you. And then, when it's bedtime, I give you my word of honor we'll go away and let you keep him if you want to. And then, when we're gone, you can decide which of you is to have him, as you all want him so much." "That's fair enough," said the man who was holding the baby, trying to loosen the red neckerchief which the lamb had caught hold of and drawn round his mahogany throat so tight that he could hardly breathe. The gypsies whispered together, and Cyril took the chance to whisper too. He said, "Sunset. We'll get away then." And then his brothers and sisters were filled with wonder and admiration at his having been so clever as to remember this. "Oh, do let him come to us," said Jane. "See, we'll sit down here and take care of him for you till he gets used to you." "What about dinner?" said Robert suddenly. The others looked at him with scorn. "Fancy bothering about your beastly dinner when you're BR. I mean when the baby," Jane whispered hotly. Robert carefully winked at her and went on. "You won't mind my just running home to get our dinner," he said to the gypsy. "I can bring it out here in a basket." His brother and sisters felt themselves very noble and despised him. They did not know his thoughtful secret intention, but the gypsies did in a minute. "Oh yes," they said, "and then fetch the police with a pack of lies about it being your baby instead of ours. Did you ever catch a weasel asleep?" they asked. "If you're hungry, you can pick a bit along of us," said the light-haired gypsy woman, not unkindly. "Here, Levi, that blessed kit'll howl all his buttons off. Give him to the little lady, and let's see if they can't get him used to us a bit." So the lamb was handed back, but the gypsies crowded so closely that he could not possibly stop howling. Then the man with the red handkerchief said, "Here, Pharaoh, make up the fire, and you girls see to the pot. Give the kid a chance." So the gypsies, very much against their will, went off to their work, and the children and the lamb were left sitting on the grass. "He'll be all right at sunset," Jane whispered. "But, oh, it is awful. Suppose they are frightfully angry when they come to their senses. They might beat us, or leave us tied to trees, or something." "No, they won't," Anthea said. "Oh, my lamb, don't cry any more. It's all right. Panties got ducky. They aren't unkind people, or they wouldn't be going to give us any dinner." "Dinner," said Robert. "I won't touch their nasty dinner. It would choke me." The others thought so too then. But when the dinner was ready, it turned out to be supper, and happened between 4 and 5. They were all glad enough to take what they could get. It was boiled rabbit, with onions, and some bird rather like a chicken, but stringier about its legs, and with a stronger taste. The lamb had bread soaked in hot water, and brown sugar sprinkled on the top. He liked this very much, and consented to let the 2 gypsy women feed him with it, as he sat on Anthea's lap. All that long hot afternoon Robert and Cyril and Anthea and Jane had to keep the lamb amused and happy, while the gypsies looked eagerly on. By the time the shadows grew long and black across the meadows, he had really taken to the woman with the light hair, and even consented to kiss his hand to the children, and to stand up and bow, with his hand on his chest, like a gentleman to the two men. The whole gypsy camp was in raptures with him, and his brothers and sisters could not help taking some pleasure in showing off his accomplishments to an audience so interested and enthusiastic. But they longed for sunset. "We're getting into the habit of longing for sunset," Cyril whispered. "How I do wish we could wish something really sensible. That would be of some use, so that we should be quite sorry when sunset came." The shadows got longer and longer, and at last there were no separate shadows anymore, but one soft, glowing shadow over everything. For the sun was out of sight behind the hill, but he had not really set yet. The people who make the laws about lighting bicycle lamps are the people who decide when the sun sets. He has to do it, too, to the minute, or they would know the reason why. But the gypsies were getting impatient. "Now, young uns," the red handkerchief man said, "it's time you were laying of your heads on your pillows. So it is. The kid's all right and friendly with us now. So you just hand him over and sling that hook o' yours like you said." The women and children came crowding round the lamb. Arms were held out. Fingers snapped invitingly. Friendly faces beaming with admiring smiles. But all failed to tempt the loyal lamb. He clung with arms and legs to Jane, who happened to be holding him, and uttered the gloomiest roar of the whole day. "It's no good," the woman said. "Hand the little poppet over, miss. We'll soon quiet him." And still the sun would not set. "Tell her about how to put him to bed," whispered Cyril. "Anything to gain time, and be ready to bolt when the sun really does make up its silly old mind to set." "Yes, I'll hand him over in just 1 minute," Anthea began, talking very fast. "But do let me just tell you he has a warm bath every night and cold in the morning. And he has a crockery rabbit to go into the warm bath with him. And little Samuel saying his prayers in white china on a red cushion for the cold bath. And if you let the soap get into his eyes, the lamb kies," said he. He had stopped roaring to listen. The woman laughed. "As if I hadn't never bathed a babby," she said. "Come, give us a hold of him. Come to Melia, my precious." "Gee-way, Ugsy," replied the lamb at once. "Yes, but," Anthea went on, "about his meals, you really must let me tell you he has an apple or a banana every morning, and bread and milk for breakfast, and an egg for his tea sometimes. And I've brought up 10, said the black ringleted woman, besides the others. Come, miss, and I am over. I can't bear it no longer. I just must give him a hug. We ain't settled yet whose he's to be, Esther, said one of the men. It won't be you, Esther, with 7 of 'em at your tail already. I ain't so sure of that, said Esther's husband. And ain't I nobody to have a say neither, said the husband of Melia. Zillah, the girl, said, and me. I'm a single girl, and no one but I am to look after. I ought to have him. Hold your tongue, shut your mouth. Don't you show me no more of your imperence. Everyone was getting very angry. The dark gypsy faces were frowning and anxious-looking. Suddenly, a change swept over them, as if some invisible sponge had wiped away these cross and anxious expressions, and left only a blank. The children saw that the sun really had set, but they were afraid to move, and the gypsies were feeling so muddled because of the invisible sponge that had washed all the feelings of the last few hours out of their hearts, that they could not say a word. The children hardly dared to breathe. Suppose the gypsies, when they recovered speech, should be furious to think how silly they had been all day. It was an awkward moment. Suddenly Anthea, greatly daring, held out the lamb to the red handkerchief man. "Here he is," she said. The man drew back. "I shouldn't like to deprive you, miss," he said hoarsely. "Anyone who likes can have my share of him," said the other man. "After all, I've got enough of my own," said Esther. "He's a nice little chap, though," said Amelia. She was the only one who now looked affectionately at the whimpering lamb. Zillah said, "If I don't think I must have had a touch of the sun, I don't want him." "Then shall we take him away?" said Anthea. "Well, suppose you do," said Pharaoh heartily, "and we'll say no more about it." And with great haste, all the gypsies began to be busy about their tents for the night. All but Amelia. She went with the children as far as the bend in the road, and there she said, "Let me give him a kiss, miss. I don't know what made us go for to behave so silly. Us gypsies don't steal babies, whatever they may tell you when you're naughty. We've enough of our own, mostly. But I've lost all mine." She leaned towards the lamb, and he, looking in her eyes, unexpectedly put up a grubby soft paw and stroked her face. "Poor, poor," said the lamb, and he let the gypsy woman kiss him, and what is more, he kissed her brown cheek in return, a very nice kiss, as all his kisses are, and not a wet one like some babies give. The gypsy woman moved her finger about on his forehead, as if she had been writing something there, and the same with his chest and his hands and his feet. Then she said, "May he be brave, and have the strong head to think with, and the strong heart to love with, and the strong hands to work with, and the strong feet to travel with, and always come safe home to his own." Then she said something in a strange language no one could understand, and suddenly added, "Well, I must be saying so long and glad to have made your acquaintance." And she turned and went back to her home, the tent by the grassy roadside. The children looked after her till she was out of sight. Then Robert said, "How silly of her. Even Sunset didn't put her right. What rot she talked." "Well," said Cyril, "if you ask me, I think it was rather decent of her." "Decent," said Anthea. "It was very nice indeed of her. I think she's a dear." "She's just too frightfully nice for anything," said Jane. And they went home very late for tea and unspeakably late for dinner. Martha scolded, of course, but the lamb was safe. I say, it turned out we wanted the lamb as much as anyone, said Robert later. Of course. But do you feel different about it, now the sun's set? No, said all the others together. Then it's lasted over sunset with us. No, it hasn't, Cyril explained. The wish didn't do anything to US. We always wanted him with all our hearts when we were our proper selves. Only we were all pigs this morning, especially you, Robert. Robert bore this much with a strange calm. I certainly thought I didn't want him this morning, said he. Perhaps I was a pig. But everything looked so different when we thought we were going to lose him. Wings. The next day was very wet, too wet to go out, and far too wet to think of disturbing a sand fairy, so sensitive to water that he still, after thousands of years, felt the pain of once having had his left whisker wetted. It was a long day, and it was not till the afternoon that all the children suddenly decided to write letters to their mother. It was Robert who had the misfortune to upset the ink pot, an unusually deep and full one, straight into that part of Anthea's desk where she had long pretended that an arrangement of gum and cardboard painted with Indian ink was a secret drawer. It was not exactly Robert's fault. It was only his misfortune that he chanced to be lifting the ink across the desk just at the moment when Anthea had got it open, and that same moment should have been the one chosen by the lamb to get under the table and break his squeaking bird. There was a sharp, convenient wire inside the bird, and of course the lamb ran the wire into Robert's leg at once. And so, without anyone's meaning to, the secret drawer was flooded with ink. At the same time, a stream was poured over Anthea's half-finished letter, so that her letter was something like this: "Darling Mother, I hope you are quite well, and I hope Granny is better. The other day Then came a flood of ink, and at the bottom these words in pencil. It was not me upset the ink, but it took such a time clearing up, so no more as it is post time. From your loving daughter, Anthea." Robert's letter had not even been begun. He had been drawing a ship on the blotting paper while he was trying to think of what to say. And of course, after the ink was upset, he had to help Anthea to clean out her desk. And he promised to make her another secret drawer, better than the other. And she said, "Well, make it now." So it was post time, and his letter wasn't done, and the secret drawer wasn't done either. Cyril wrote a long letter very fast, and then went to set a trap for slugs that he had read about in the Homemade Gardener. And when it was post time, the letter could not be found, and it never was found. Perhaps the slugs ate it. Jane's letter was the only one that went. She meant to tell her mother all about the Samite. In fact, they had all meant to do this, but she spent so long thinking how to spell the word that there was no time to tell the story properly. And it is useless to tell a story unless you do tell it properly. So she had to be contented with this. "My dear mother dear, we are all as good as we can, like you told us to, and the lamb has a little cold, but Martha says it is nothing. Only he upset the goldfish into himself yesterday morning. When we were up at the sandpit the other day, we went round by the safe way where carts go, and we found a half an hour went by before Jane felt quite sure that they could none of them spell Samite, and they could not find it in the dictionary either, though they looked. Then Jane hastily finished her letter. We found a strange thing, but it is nearly post time, so no more at present from your little girl Jane. P.S. If you could have a wish come true, what would you have?" Then the postman was heard blowing his horn, and Robert rushed out in the rain to stop his cart and give him the letter. And that was how it happened that, though all the children meant to tell their mother about the sand fairy, somehow or other she never got to know. There were other reasons why she never got to know, but these come later. The next day Uncle Richard came and took them all to Maidstone in a wagonette, all except the lamb. Uncle Richard was the very best kind of uncle. He bought them toys at Maidstone. He took them into a shop, and let them choose exactly what they wanted, without any restrictions about price, and no nonsense about things being instructive. It is very wise to let children choose exactly what they like, because they are very foolish and inexperienced, and sometimes they will choose a really instructive thing without meaning to. This happened to Robert, who chose, at the last moment, and in a great hurry, a box with pictures on it of winged bulls with men's heads, and winged men with eagles' heads. He thought there would be animals inside, the same as on the box. When he got it home, it was a Sunday puzzle about ancient Nineveh. The others chose in haste, and were happy at leisure. Cyril had a model engine, and the girls had 2 dolls, as well as a china tea set with forget-me-nots on it, to be between them. The boys between them was bow and arrows. Then Uncle Richard took them on the beautiful Medway in a boat, and then they all had tea at a beautiful pasture cook's, and when they reached home, it was far too late to have any wishes that day. They did not tell Uncle Richard anything about the Sammead. I do not know why, and they do not know why, but I dare say you can guess. The day after Uncle Richard had behaved so handsomely was a very hot day indeed. The people who decide what the weather is to be and put its orders down for it in the newspapers every morning said afterwards that it was the hottest day there had been for years. They had ordered it to be warmer some showers, and warmer it certainly was. In fact, it was so busy being warmer that it had no time to attend to the order about showers, so there weren't any. Have you ever been up at 5 o'clock on a fine summer morning? It is very beautiful. The sunlight is pinky and yellowy, and all the grass and trees are covered with dew diamonds, and all the shadows go the opposite way to the way they do in the evening, which is very interesting and makes you feel as though you were in a new other world. Anthea awoke at 5. She had made herself wake, and I must tell you how it is done, even if it keeps you waiting for the story to go on. You get into bed at night and lie down quite flat on your little back with your hands straight down by your sides. Then you say, I must wake up at 5, or 6, or 7, or 8, or 9, or whatever the time is that you want. And as you say it, you push your chin down onto your chest, and then bang your head back on the pillow. And you do this as many times as there are ones in the time you want to wake up at. It is quite an easy sum. Of course, everything depends on your really wanting to get up at 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9. If you don't really want to, it's all of no use. But if you do well, try it and see. Of course in this, as in doing Latin proses or getting into mischief, practice makes perfect. Anthea was quite perfect. At the very moment when she opened her eyes, she heard the blackened gold clock down in the dining room strike 11. So she knew it was 3 minutes to 5. The blackened gold clock always struck wrong, but it was all right when you knew what it meant. It was like a person talking a foreign language. If you know the language, it is just as easy to understand as English. And Anthea knew the clock language. She was very sleepy, but she jumped out of bed and put her face and hands into a basin of cold water. This is a fairy charm that prevents your wanting to get back into bed again. Then she dressed, and folded up her nightgown. She did not tumble it together by the sleeves, but folded it by the seams from the hem. And that will show you the kind of well-brought-up little girl she was. Then she took her shoes in her hand and crept softly down the stairs. She opened the dining room window and climbed out. It would have been just as easy to go out by the door, but the window was more romantic and less likely to be noticed by Martha. "I will always get up at 5, she said to herself. It was quite too awfully pretty for anything. Her heart was beating very fast, for she was carrying out a plan quite her own. She could not be sure that it was a good plan, but she was quite sure that it would not be any better if she were to tell the others about it. And she had a feeling that, right or wrong, she would rather go through with it alone. She put on her shoes under the iron veranda, on the red and yellow shining tiles, and then she ran straight to the sandpit and found the Sammead's place and dug it out. It was very cross indeed. "It's too bad," it said, fluffing up its fur like pigeons do their feathers at Christmas time. "The weather's Arctic, and it's the middle of the night. I'm so sorry," said Anthea gently, and she took off her white pinafore and covered the sand fairy up with it, all but its head, its bat's ears, and its eyes that were like a snail's eyes. "Thank you," it said. "That's better. What's the wish this morning?" "I don't know," said she. "That's just it. You see, we've been very unlucky so far. I wanted to talk to you about it. But would you mind not giving me any wishes till after breakfast? It's so hard to talk to anyone if they jump out at you with wishes you don't really want. You shouldn't say you wish for things if you don't wish for them. In the old days, people almost always knew whether it was Megatherium or Ichthyosaurus they really wanted for dinner." "I'll try not," said Anthea, "but I do wish, look out," said the Sammead in a warning voice, and it began to blow itself out. "Oh, this isn't a magic wish, it's just, I should be so glad if you'd not swell yourself out and nearly burst to give me anything just now. Wait till the others are here." "Well, well," it said indulgently, but it shivered. "Would you," asked Anthea kindly, "would you like to come and sit on my lap? You'd be warmer, and I could turn the skirt of my frock up round you. I'd be very careful." Anthea had never expected that it would, but it did. "Thank you," it said. "You really are rather thoughtful." It crept onto her lap and snuggled down, and she put her arms round it with a rather frightened gentleness. "Now then," it said. "Well then," said Anthea, "everything we have wished has turned out rather horrid. I wish you would advise us. You are so old, you must be very wise." "I was always generous from a child," said the Sand Fairy. "I've spent the whole of my waking hours in giving. But one thing I won't give, that's advice. You see," Anthea went on, "it's such a wonderful thing, such a splendid, glorious chance. It's so good and kind and dear of you to give us our wishes, and it seems such a pity it should all be wasted just because we are too silly to know what to wish for." Anthea had meant to say that, and she had not wanted to say it before the others. It's one thing to say you're silly, and quite another to say that other people are. "Child," said the Sand Fairy sleepily, "I can only advise you to think before you speak, but I thought you never gave advice. That piece doesn't count, never take it. Besides, it's not original. It's in all the copybooks. But won't you just say if you think wings would be a silly wish? Wings, it said, I should think you might do worse. Only, take care you aren't flying high at sunset. There was a little Ninevite boy I heard of once. He was one of King Sennacherib's sons, and a traveler brought him a samite. He used to keep it in a box of sand on the palace terrace. It was a dreadful degradation for one of us, of course. Still, the boy was the Assyrian king's son. And one day he wished for wings and got them. But he forgot that they would turn into stone at sunset. And when they did, he fell slap on to one of the winged lions at the top of his father's great staircase. And what with his stone wings and the lion's stone wings, well, it's not a pretty story. But I believe the boy enjoyed himself very much till then. Tell me, said Anthea, why don't our wishes turn into stone now? Why do they just vanish? Otters' temps, otters' mowers, said the creature. Is that the Ninevite language? Asked Anthea, who had learned no foreign language at school except French. What I mean is, the Samite went on, that in the old days people wished for good solid everyday gifts, mammoths and pterodactyls and things, and those could be turned into stone as easy as not. But people wish such high-flying, fanciful things nowadays. How are you going to turn being beautiful as the day, or being wanted by everybody, into stone? You see, it can't be done, and it would never do to have two rules, so they simply vanish. If being beautiful as the day could be turned into stone, it would last an awfully long time. You know, much longer than you would. Just look at the Greek statues. It's just as well as it is. Goodbye. I am so sleepy. It jumped off her lap, dug frantically, and vanished. Anthea was late for breakfast. It was Robert who quietly poured a spoonful of treacle down the lamb's frock, so that he had to be taken away and washed thoroughly directly after breakfast. And it was, of course, a very naughty thing to do. Yet it served two purposes. It delighted the lamb, who loved above all things to be completely sticky, and it engaged Martha's attention, so that the others could slip away to the sandpit without the lamb. They did it, and in the lane Anthea, breathless from the scurry of that slipping, panted out, I want to propose we take turns to wish. Only, nobody's to have a wish if the others don't think it's a nice wish. Do you agree? Who's to have first wish? Asked Robert cautiously. Me, if you don't mind, said Anthea apologetically. And I've thought about it, and its wings. There was a silence. The others rather wanted to find fault. But it was hard, because the word wings raised a flutter of joyous excitement in every breast. Not so dusty, said Cyril generously, and Robert added, really, Panther, you're not quite such a fool as you look. Jane said, I think it would be perfectly lovely. It's like a bright dream of delirium. They found the sand fairy easily. Anthea said, I wish we all had beautiful wings to fly with. The sand fairy blew himself out, and next moment each child felt a funny feeling, half heaviness and half lightness, on its shoulders. The Samite put its head on one side and turned its snail's eyes from one to the other. Not so dusty, it said dreamily. But really, Robert, you're not quite such an angel as you look. Robert almost blushed. The wings were very big and more beautiful than you can possibly imagine, for they were soft and smooth, and every feather lay neatly in its place. And the feathers were of the most lovely mixed changing colors, like the rainbow or iridescent glass, or the beautiful scum that sometimes floats on water that is not at all nice to drink. "Oh, but can we fly?" Jane said, standing anxiously first on one foot and then on the other. "Look out," said Cyril, "you're treading on my wing. Does it hurt?" asked Anthea with interest, but no one answered, for Robert had spread his wings and jumped up, and now he was slowly rising in the air. He looked very awkward in his knickerbocker suit. His boots in particular hung helplessly, and seemed much larger than when he was standing in them. But the others cared but little how he looked, or how they looked, for that matter. For now they all spread out their wings and rose in the air. Of course, you all know what flying feels like, because everyone has dreamed about flying, and it seems so beautifully easy. Only, you can never remember how you did it. And as a rule, you have to do it without wings in your dreams, which is more clever and uncommon, but not so easy to remember the rule for. Now, the 4 children rose flapping from the ground, and you can't think how good the air felt running against their faces. Their wings were tremendously wide when they were spread out, and they had to fly quite a long way apart so as not to get in each other's way. But little things like this are easily learned. All the words in the English dictionary, and in the Greek lexicon as well, are, I find, of no use at all to tell you exactly what it feels like to be flying, so I will not try. But I will say that to look down on the fields and woods, instead of along at them, is something like looking at a beautiful live map, where, instead of silly colors on paper, you have real moving sunny woods and green fields laid out one after the other, as Cyril said, and I can't think where he got hold of such a strange expression. It does you a fair treat. It was most wonderful, and more like real magic than any wish the children had had yet. They flapped and flew and sailed on their great rainbow wings between green earth and blue sky, and they flew right over Rochester and then swerved round towards Maidstone, and presently they all began to feel extremely hungry. Curiously enough, this happened when they were flying rather low, and just as they were crossing an orchard where some early plums shone red and ripe. They paused on their wings. I cannot explain to you how this is done, but it is something like treading water when you are swimming, and hawks do it extremely well. "Yes, I dare say," said Cyril, though no one had spoken. "But stealing is stealing even if you've got wings." "Do you really think so?" said Jane briskly. "If you've got wings you're a bird, and no one minds birds breaking the commandments. At least they may mind, but the birds always do it, and no one scolds them or sends them to prison. It was not so easy to perch on a plum tree as you might think, because the rainbow wings were so very large, but somehow they all managed to do it, and the plums were certainly very sweet and juicy. Fortunately, it was not till they had all had quite as many plums as were good for them that they saw a stout man, who looked exactly as though he owned the plum trees, come hurrying through the orchard gate with a thick stick, and with one accord they disentangled their wings from the plum-laden branches and began to fly. The man stopped short, with his mouth open, for he had seen the boughs of his trees moving and twitching, and he had said to himself, "The young varmints at it again," and he had come out at once, for the lads of the village had taught him, in past seasons, that plums want looking after. But when he saw the rainbow wings flutter up out of the plum tree, he felt that he must have gone quite mad, and he did not like the feeling at all. And when Anthea looked down and saw his mouth go slowly open and stay so, and his face become green and mauve in patches, she called out, "Don't be frightened," and felt hastily in her pocket for a 3-penny bit with a hole in it, which she had meant to hang on a ribbon round her neck, for luck. She hovered round the unfortunate plum owner and said, "We have had some of your plums. We thought it wasn't stealing, but now I am not so sure. So here's some money to pay for them." She swooped down towards the terror-stricken grower of plums and slipped the coin into the pocket of his jacket, and in a few flaps she had rejoined the others. The farmer sat down on the grass, suddenly and heavily. "Well, I'm blessed," he said. "This here is what they call delusions, I suppose. But this here 3-penny, he had pulled it out and bitten it, that's real enough. Well, from this day forth, I'll be a better man. It's the kind of thing to sober a chap for life, this is. I'm glad it was only wings, though. I'd rather see birds as aren't there, and couldn't be, even if they pretend to talk, than some things as I could name." He got up slowly and heavily and went indoors, and he was so nice to his wife that day that she felt quite happy and said to herself, "Law, whatever have a come to the man?" and smartened herself up and put a blue ribbon bow at the place where her collar fastened on, and looked so pretty that he was kinder than ever. So perhaps the winged children really did do one good thing that day. If so, it was the only one, for really, there is nothing like wings for getting you into trouble. But on the other hand, if you arc in trouble, there is nothing like wings for getting you out of it. This was the case in the matter of the fierce dog, who sprang out at them when they had folded up their wings as small as possible, and were going up to a farm door to ask for a crust of bread and cheese. For in spite of the plums, they were soon just as hungry as ever again. Now, there is no doubt whatever that, if the 4 had been ordinary wingless children, that black and fierce dog would have had a good bite out of the brown-stockinged leg of Robert, who was the nearest. But at first growl, there was a flutter of wings, and the dog was left to strain at his chain and stand on his hind legs as if he were trying to fly too. They tried several other farms, but at those where there were no dogs, the people were far too frightened to do anything but scream. And at last, when it was nearly 4 o'clock, and their wings were getting miserably stiff and tired, they alighted on a church tower and held a council of war. "We can't possibly fly all the way home without dinner or tea," said Robert with desperate decision. "And nobody will give us any dinner, or even lunch, let alone tea," said Cyril. "Perhaps the clergyman here might," suggested Anthea. "He must know all about angels. Anybody could see we're not that," said Jane. "Look at Robert's boots and Squirrel's plaid necktie. "Well," said Cyril firmly, "if the country you're in won't sell provisions, you take them. In wars, I mean. I'm quite certain you do. And even in other stories, no good brother would allow his little sisters to starve in the midst of plenty." "Plenty," repeated Robert hungrily, and the others looked vaguely round the bare leads of the church tower and murmured, in the midst of. "Yes," said Cyril impressively. "There is a larder window at the side of the clergyman's house, and I saw things to eat inside, custard pudding, and cold chicken, and tongue, and pies, and jam." "It's rather a high window, but with wings. How clever of you," said Jane. "Not at all," said Cyril modestly. "Any born General Napoleon or the Duke of Marlborough would have seen it just the same as I did." "It seems very wrong," said Anthea. "Nonsense," said Cyril. "What was it Sir Philip Sidney said when the soldier wouldn't stand him a drink? 'My necessity is greater than his.' We'll club our money, though, and leave it to pay for the things, won't we?" Anthea was persuasive, and very nearly in tears, because it is most trying to feel enormously hungry and unspeakably sinful at one and the same time. Some of it was the cautious reply. Everyone now turned out its pockets on the lead roof of the tower, where visitors for the last 150 years had cut their own, and their sweethearts' initials with penknives in the soft lead. There was 5 and 7 halfpenny altogether, and even the upright Anthea admitted that that was too much to pay for 4 people's dinners. Robert said he thought 18 pence, and half a crown was finally agreed to be handsome. So Anthea wrote on the back of her last term's report, which happened to be in her pocket, and from which she first tore her own name and that of the school, the following letter. "Dear Reverend Clergyman, we are very hungry indeed because of having to fly all day, and we think it is not stealing when you are starving to death. We are afraid to ask you for fear you should say no, because of course you know about angels, but you would not think we were angels. We will only take the necessities of life, and no pudding or pie, to show you it is not greediness, but true starvation that makes us make your larder stand and deliver. But we are not highwaymen by trade." "Cut it short," said the others with one accord, and Anthea hastily added, "Our intentions are quite honorable if you only knew. And here is half a crown to show we are sincere and grateful. Thank you for your kind hospitality. From us 4. The half-crown was wrapped in this letter, and all the children felt that when the clergyman had read it, he would understand everything, as well as anyone could who had not seen the wings. "Now," said Cyril, "of course there's some risk. We'd better fly straight down the other side of the tower, and then flutter low across the churchyard and in through the shrubbery. There doesn't seem to be anyone about, but you never know. The window looks out into the shrubbery. It is embowered in foliage, like a window in a story. I'll go in and get the things. Robert and Anthea can take them as I hand them out through the window, and Jane can keep watch. Her eyes are sharp, and whistle if she sees anyone about. Shut up, Robert. She can whistle quite well enough for that anyway. It ought not to be a very good whistle. It'll sound more natural and bird-like. Now then, off we go. I cannot pretend that stealing is right. I can only only say that on this occasion it did not look like stealing to the hungry four, but appeared in the light of a fair and reasonable business transaction. They had never happened to learn that a tongue hardly cut into a chicken and a half, a loaf of bread, and a siphon of soda water cannot be bought in shops for half a crown. These were the necessaries of life, which Cyril handed out of the larder window, when, quite unobserved and without hindrance or adventure, he had led the others to that happy spot. He felt that to refrain from jam, apple turnovers, cake, and mixed candied peel was a really heroic act, and I agree with him. He was also proud of not taking the custard pudding, and there I think he was wrong, because if he had taken it, there would have been a difficulty about returning the dish. No one, however starving, has a right to steal china pie dishes with little pink flowers on them. The soda water siphon was different. They could not do without something to drink, and as the maker's name was on it, they felt sure it would be returned to him wherever they might leave it. If they had time, they would take it back themselves. The man appeared to live in Rochester, which would not be much out of their way home. Everything was carried up to the top of the tower and laid down on a sheet of kitchen paper, which Cyril had found on the top shelf of the larder. As he unfolded it, Anthea said, "I don't think that's a necessity of life." "Yes, it is," said he. "We must put the things down somewhere to cut them up. And I heard Father say the other day people got diseases from Germans in rainwater. Now there must be lots of rainwater here. And when it dries up, the Germans are left, and they'd get into the things, and we should all die of scarlet fever." "What are Germans?" "Little waggly things you see with microscopes," said Cyril, with a scientific air. "They give you every illness you can think of. I'm sure the paper was a necessary, just as much as the bread and meat and water. Now then, oh, my eyes, I'm hungry. I do not wish to describe the picnic party on the top of the tower. You can imagine well enough what it is like to carve a chicken, and a tongue with a knife that has only one blade, and that snapped off short about halfway down. But it was done. Eating with your fingers is greasy and difficult, and paper dishes soon get to look very spotty and horrid. But one thing you can't imagine, and that is how soda water behaves when you try to drink it straight out of a siphon, especially a quite full one. But if imagination will not help you, experience will, and you can easily try it for yourself if you can get a grown-up to give you the siphon. If you want to have a really thorough experience, put the tube in your mouth and press the handle very suddenly and very hard. You had better do it when you are alone, and out of doors is best for this experiment. However you eat them, tongue and chicken and new bread are very good things, and no one minds being sprinkled a little with soda water on a really fine hot day, so that everyone enjoyed the dinner very much indeed, and everyone ate as much as it possibly could. First, because it was extremely hungry, and secondly, because, as I said, tongue and chicken and new bread are very nice. Now, I dare say you will have noticed that if you have to wait for your dinner till long after the proper time, and then eat a great deal more dinner than usual, and sit in the hot sun on the top of a church tower, or even anywhere else, you become soon and strangely sleepy. Now Anthea and Jane and Cyril and Robert were very like you in many ways, and when they had eaten all they could and drunk all there was, they became sleepy, strangely, and soon, especially Anthea, because she had got up so early. One by one, they left off talking and leaned back, and before it was a quarter of an hour after dinner, they had all curled round and tucked themselves up under their large, soft, warm wings and were fast asleep. And the sun was sinking slowly in the west. I must say it was in the west, because it is usual in books to say so, for fear careless people should think it was setting in the east. In point of fact, it was not exactly in the west either, but that's near enough. The sun, I repeat, was sinking slowly in the west, and the children slept warmly and happily on. For wings are cozier than eider-down quilts to sleep under. The shadow of the church tower fell across the churchyard, and across the vicarage, and across the field beyond, and presently there were no more shadows, and the sun had set, and the wings were gone. And still the children slept, but not for long. Twilight is very beautiful, but it is chilly, and you know, however sleepy you are, you wake up soon enough if your brother or sister happens to be up first and pulls your blankets off you. The 4 wingless children shivered and woke, and there they were on the top of a church tower in the dusky twilight, with blue stars coming out by 1s and 2s and 10s and 20s over their heads, miles away from home, with 3 and 3 halfpence in their pockets, and a doubtful act about the necessities of life to be accounted for if anyone found them with the soda water siphon. They looked at each other. Cyril spoke first, picking up the siphon. We'd better get along down and get rid of this beastly thing. It's dark enough to leave it on the clergyman's doorstep, I should think. Come on. There was a little turret at the corner of the tower, and the little turret had a door in it. They had noticed this when they were eating, but had not explored it as you would have done in their place. Because, of course, when you have wings and can explore the whole sky, doors seem hardly worth exploring. Now they turned towards it. Of course, said Cyril, this is the way down. It was, but the door was locked on the inside, and the world was growing darker and darker, and they were miles from home, and there was the soda water siphon. I shall not tell you whether anyone cried, nor if so, how many cried, nor who cried. You will be better employed in making up your minds what you would have done if you had been in their place.